Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Shape the System. We're in person today, which I'm super pumped about. We haven't done an in-person interview since before COVID. So I think maybe in the middle of COVID, in between the two COVID breaks. So we're doing our specialist interview format today. And actually, I'm stoked to welcome Amanda to the show. And Amanda is from KPMG High Growth Ventures. And if you've been listening to us for the last year or so, or even more, you'll know that they are a supporter of the show and make it possible. So I'm just going to open with a thank you. I know there's a preamble that's pre-recorded, but as an extra special thank you, it's actually not possible to put this show on without you guys. Thank you for being a supporter.
We're thrilled to be supported.
And we'll dive straight in. So before we do, though, just please introduce yourself, where you are, and just give us a bit about KPMG High Growth Ventures, and then we can go into what we're going to talk about.
Sure. So, Amanda Price, Head of High Growth Ventures. So, I've been doing this for 6 years. We're a team within KPMG that's dedicated to working with startups.
Yep.
And I suppose over the last few years, we've developed a range of services and offerings that are priced specifically and designed specifically for startups.
Okay. And I'm going to just pick on one word there that I want to make sure we're clear on. Like the number of people who call their coffee shop a startup.
Yep.
No offense to the coffee shop owners. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so predominantly technology startups.
Yeah.
And we start working at pre-Series A. So everyone's surprised that we start that early, but we actually like to start very early.
Yeah.
Pre-Series A all the way through to IPO exit, some sort of event. So we've got sort of range of services across that.
And is it like the funding thing is a way of denoting that's interesting to me? We don't talk a lot about funding, but purely just to get us in the zone. If the company is never intending to raise capital, is it still a stage-based thing, not necessarily a funding-based thing?
It's a really good point, actually, because about 30% of our companies are bootstrapped. So it's, they don't fit into it, but I use it because often it's an easy way for people to understand it. So I think we're looking for companies that if they haven't got funding, they're in market, they're starting to have customers and things like that. So I think there's some traction there, but we're certainly not looking for huge amounts of revenue or anything at the beginning because we think our lens on it is the earlier we can start, then we can really start founders thinking about the sort of foundations that they need to have to ensure that the business is sustainable when it scales.
Yeah, perfect. And so if we relate that back to some other kind of startup jargon / parlance, they probably have problem solution fit. They have customers who want what they've got.
That's right.
And they might be getting toward product market fit where they've worked out some of the economics, but
absolutely,
that's kind of where they're at.
That's exactly right. So it's not an idea. It's beyond an idea, and it's about that stage.
Bit beyond the PowerPoint.
Bit beyond the PowerPoint. There's not much to work with there for us, but not our area of expertise. I think there's a lot of people that do that really well.
Sure.
But so they're definitely in market.
Okay. And just for the nature, we have, I think, 40% of people from outside of Australia listening, but your focus is on Australian startups specifically.
Startups, and one's coming in. We've got startups coming in from India. We work with startups coming from New Zealand and things like that. So we've got quite a...
Just as an aside, why are they coming
this way?
Yeah.
There is a lot of Indian companies coming this way, and New Zealand, obviously, they come here as well. So, we've got a real mix, actually.
But what do you think is driving that macro? Is it just a great regulatory environment or?
It is. Yeah, it is. We've also got a very big Indian community here. So they come this way and we go that way. And it's actually another project I'm working on at the moment is to look at how we actually look at that diaspora and how we can help that.
I don't know what that word means.
Oh,
I love that word.
Advance. We had Advance when we were in the States. So Advance was basically the largest network of Australians living abroad. So it's really looking at when Australians like us went and lived in the States, how do you harness that knowledge and bring it back so you've got this two-way. The Indians are very good at doing that. Yeah, and that's what diaspora is. There you go.
Thank you.
Can we finish now and taught you something?
I only have one thing to learn from the interview. That's definitely it.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. No, there was something that I'm curious about we spoke about just before as well. You said that the categories that you tend to operate in are deep tech and climate tech. I think people get climate tech as in it's to do with the climate, sustainability more broadly. So it's not just CO2, but literally everything related to how we impact and how we consume. Help me understand deep tech and then just help me understand a little bit more about why these categories as well.
Yeah, sorry, just on that too. We've got obviously fintech, prop tech, med tech's big for us. So it's a range, but we've seen certainly over the last few years for us who started working more with deep tech companies. So there are ones that typically are working on things you don't understand. We don't understand.
That's
that are
how
really
we put it in
solving
that
the
bucket.
world. Yeah.
Must be deep tech. No one understands it.
That are quite technical, quite very more scientific.
Right.
So ones that are typical, might come out of Cyro or,
Yeah.
those sorts of things. So it's, I'm trying to think of some examples. There's lots of them, like satellite companies or things that require actually a lot of them are quite capital intensive, take a lot of time to get to a revenue point.
Yeah.
Just need a lot of investment and a lot of support because a lot of the founders in that space, and I'm talking very generally, are more from scientific backgrounds than commercial backgrounds. So it's sort of like, how can we help them think about things like all the boring things, tax and structuring and R&D and government grants and finance functions and things like that. So that's why we start working with them a lot, but also because in the firm, those categories are ones where people get very excited about working with those types of companies. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
The firm more broadly says, hey, that's a category we're interested in and how we can learn from that. Or
Well, the High Growth Ventures team, we don't deliver the work. So our role is to work with the startups themselves. We represent the founders within KPMG, but we find the right people to do the work. But so with our network internally of people that deliver the work, if we bring a climate tech, like when we brought Great Wrap is one of ours. So potato skins. Yeah, they have, of course. Julie and Jody, the firm, we could have got so many people working on that job.
We're all excited for that.
They're really excited about it because you've got average age in the firm's 27. So you've got all these people who are very aware of that space and really want to get involved with it. So it makes sense for us as well. They it gets a lot of, if we sort of think these days, much hate to say it, if we had a sort of more of a non-impact client, it's not as easy to get people. People really want to work with the climate tech impact.
That's super interesting. I was going to try and understand where that was coming, but it sounds like that's happened organically.
Yeah.
Since you've been here there.
It absolutely has, yeah.
I want to come back to both climate tech, I think, but deep tech for sure. My guess is that not only is there, and in general terms, very technical people working deep in technical, and then they're having to think commercially or about things like boring stuff, I think you just called it.
Yeah.
But my guess is as well in deep tech and definitely in climate tech to a degree, that bar is probably higher as well. Heavily regulated industries, large multinationals, defense corporations buying this stuff. Like you can't do that stuff. You're not a Facebook or an Instagram, right?
No. And there's a lot of compliance. This is it's just one of the things in being a climate tech company. I'm speaking broadly. I won't go. Sure. A lot of their customers are going to be big energy companies or corp. And so with that comes a level of compliance that's required from that startup.
Yeah.
And often it's a level of compliance that's required before the startup's really ready to pay for it.
Sure.
And to put that in place. And so it's working with them and also on the other side, trying to get that information from our corporates around what is really required, because often what they'll say is absolutely required. There might be some leniency around that. So it's really actually helping people understand that before they go and put it in place.
You can't tell because we're audio only show, but I'm grinning because when I was like in my early 20s and I sold a bit of software to Westpac as it was, and they had to do a security audit or something, and we were a 3-person organisation at this point. And they asked me a question. I can't remember what it was, but it was, what's your environmental policy or something? I'm like, how are we supposed to even have any of this stuff? And how is this relevant?
I know.
We're providing software to mortgage brokers.
It's like,
Is that like, do you think the founders who come up with the amazing innovation, the amazing idea, I'm kind of working out at what point do they realise there's a whole bunch of other stuff I'm going to have to deal with and it's not at all related to the actual innovation that I'm working on? Where does that decision land, or when did that?
I think it starts from when we're saying what's your run rate, what's your cash flow. Like I think there's all elements of that along the way, because those people, a lot of them just haven't actually thought to have any experience in that. So even how do you establish a proper finance function? How do you hire the right CFO? Because startups need a specific set, especially if you're a highly capital intensive business, you're going to do a lot of capital raise. Well, how do you actually check and how do you qualify the person you're about to hire as your CFO as a startup expert when you don't know what to ask? So it's like me trying to hire an engineer. How would I hire an engineer? I wouldn't know. So
Can you code?
Yeah, no, that's why I'm not going to hire any engineers. But I think that starts early, finance. And then even if you get into R&D, all of the R&D reports and the government grants, writing the submissions, and then it goes into all of the other stuff. You got to think about cyber now. Another really big thing you've got to think about early, ESG. That's compliance. And all of those things are compliance-led.
Knowing how to capture data, report on data.
Right, the data privacy laws, all of that, like really making sure. And now you've seen over the last few years, and you work in regulated environments as well, it's not going away. It's getting more and more regulated. People want to, and we've got systems that allow transparency. So you can't get away. There's not really a way you can hide because people can ask for the data and ask for the systems. And so you've got to have a really strong eye over that. And it's typically not what founders want to do. Is that what you want to do with your time?
No, I know. I have 3 buckets of things. The things that I love doing and I'm good at.
Yep.
And I actually have this as a job interview thing. If I interview someone and they're thinking of coming on, I get them to write this down. What are the things that you love, that you're good at, that you'll just absolutely crush? What are the bucket of things that you don't love, but you are very good at it and you can do? And what are the things that you hate, you're going to do a shit job? Excuse my French.
Yeah.
If you do it, and risk and compliance is in that 3rd bucket.
Yeah. And it is for most of them.
People.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I don't know if you've ever used Fingerprints for Success.
No.
Oh, there's a tool out there. We use it for the team. It's really good. Michelle Duval's the founder. She's excellent. It's Fingerprints for Success. Do it with your team and it allows you to aggregate the data and have a look at it. But what it tells you is not what you are good at, but what you like to do. It's where so it's really detailed and it shows you in a team. If you've got a team, which at one point mine was like, I think I was hiring all me's. No one wanted to do compliance. No one had any
Everyone's an ideas person.
So we've evened that out over the years, thank God. And my 2IC we've worked out now is the exact opposite of me, which is very helpful and needed. But yeah, I think that's right. And I think that awareness, I think that tool allows you to have a little bit more awareness of these things. And I think these days, it's not good enough to think I'm okay at it. You can't be okay at it.
No,
you've got to have that, and it is the boring side of it. But that's why I think I said to you before, like in setting High Growth Ventures up, I've probably done it in all the services that I would have wanted someone else to do when I had startups as well.
I'm the perfect customer. That's why I'm
exactly.
here. So you don't have to deal with what I had to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to come back to a kind of a point you've made. It's adjacent to a point that you made. And it was about the level of governance and oversight in some of these lenses, financial services or ESG, I think was the example that you used. Is there a bit of a challenge here at a macro level that the very people we want to innovate, least equipped and least able to deal with this level of governance and oversight because of their scale or because of the lack of skill set that they have?
Yeah. That's a complete mismatch. And that's why you do partner with other externals or find people and you'll hire a risk person. Also, it's probably not the best hire, but get people that are good at it to have a lens over that so you don't have to do it. And I think, and you would see this with founders and the founders that are listening, there's a very high percentage of people that want to do everything themselves. It's really around, if you want the business to scale, that won't allow it. You cannot scale when you're doing everything.
Right.
So work out that stuff. It is easy to get that outsourced because it is compliance. So it's not something you really have to be involved. You have to be across it. You have to understand what's happening with it. You have to be able to talk to it. For when you're doing raising capital or board meetings, all of that, it's very important that you do. And that's one of the things we say as well. It's not, when we do outsource finance function, it's not taking that off you. It's actually working with the founders to make sure they understand it. We do the work.
Yeah.
So I think that the thing is, we want founders to be the founder, to keep in that mindset of growth and ideas and moving forward. Right. So I think this is something to really think carefully about, is how do you outsource that and do it early? Yeah. Get the right system set up. And it won't be a problem. It's a problem when it's left too late, and it's a problem.
Or done wrong.
But too late, it's expensive. And we hate it. It was because it's expensive. We've got to say it's going to be really expensive. And, and it wouldn't have cost anything like that if it was done at the beginning. But it's also about, I think the other point to make is it's about the right level of compliance and governance for startups. So a red flag is too much governance in a startup. So
really good at that stuff.
It's actually
no product.
Yeah, great. Has anyone seen a customer? No. But hey, I like your dashboards.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very light touch governance for early stage startups. So just to say we're not coming with heavy hand. That scales as the business scales too.
Sure.
But I think just starting with a little bit of knowledge and a framework from the beginning is such a good thing. You've got in your mind as a founder as you grow.
Yeah. It's funny, the last 5 years which is an online mortgage broker for people who may not be familiar with that, and I was always a tech founder, was never a financial services founder. It was always tech in finance, but we never had to do any of the regulation. That was your problem. We just gave you the software. But as an actual broker, we were regulated. We had an ACL, we had a credit license, and I had an incredibly good risk person for a period of the time that we were there, and learned a huge amount about the leverage that you could get from doing it well and how to do it efficiently.
That's a really good point. That's exactly right. And I think if we look at that through the lens of, let's say, like ESG.
Right.
So ESG can be painful, really hard to work out different elements of it, but it doesn't actually have to be. But it's just around, ESG is just something that you can start off in a very light way and then really ease into as well. Yeah. But I don't think it has to be do you need a person internally to do it? I was actually thinking about for that.
Well, I mean, we had 60 people at the time.
Yeah,
we had, tens of millions of dollars of investment, and the source of that investment was required, I think, that lens in it. I just think coming back to something that you sort of said before was that if you know how to do this stuff, it's not actually that difficult.
No.
You need to know how to do it. You need to know how it needs to be done, presented, recorded.
That's right.
And I think part of this is also you're not doing it. And by not doing it, you're creating a problem for your future self or even your current self. Right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
you want to go and raise money or you want to get that R&D grant, you don't even have.
Well, if you think about, again, I don't want to come across the big compliant. I'm the worst at it, to be honest, but I'm aware of it and I need to be aware of it in the environment I'm in KPMG as well and things like that. But I do think where we know the market's turned and we know because anyone who's a founder will be reading that VC investment is taking longer. And one of the key reasons for that is increased due diligence. So the due diligence that we're seeing now is hugely financially focused. And with the VCs we're speaking to and the Q&As we run, we have VCs and they're all saying that we're really in there, where the last couple of years it was pretty much on the surface. But it's not only that. They're looking at, again, I've mentioned it, what have you got with ESG? What are you actually measuring? Where are you getting the data from? How are you tracking it? How are you reporting on it? So these are things that are new and have come in, but they are very certainly looking at board structures, which we haven't seen that for ages. And so now we're sort of working with some of the companies, the pre-Series B type companies, and that's sort of where it's really going to show up, is actually really looking through things, the taxes, how are you structured? We also look at things which is really overlooked, and I'm going to point it out, founders, how you structure your own personal finances, because we're seeing a few acquisitions happen, which we haven't really seen a lot of in Australia, and the M&A activities certainly start increasing through from what we see. And the founders, because they haven't actually taken sort of the time to set their own finances up properly and set it up separately and in certain ways and make sure it's set up in a way to minimize their taxes and optimize sort of any liquidity event. It's actually pretty easy to do and they just don't do it. And so the amount of tax they're paying when we've actually got very minimal equity at some of them at the end. Yeah. It actually is really, it makes me really angry actually, because I'm just like, it's actually quite simple. So those sorts of things are, and ESG now, we're about to see a lot of companies go into capital raise, so it's going to be quite competitive. It's going to take longer.
Why are we seeing a lot of companies go?
Because a lot raised a year and a half ago. So just at the beginning, when the VCs were very much, and smartly so, saw what was happening overseas, advised everyone to raise before, and they did. So a lot of people went out and raised a lot of money, and then
make it last 2 years.
Make it last, and so that comes out. So we're working with a lot of companies right now that are going to raise. So it's going to be really competitive. More due diligence. Yeah. So you want to make sure everything's in place. So you're closing all the doors to the objections along the way. And I don't think the increased regulation, separate from the downturn in the economy, is going to go away. It's just not. We just live in an increased, unfortunately, in some ways, a regulatory world.
Yeah, but I think there's also, and I'm doing it even on this call, thinking, or this in-person interview, which I shouldn't call a call.
I'm here.
You're here. I'm present. No, I'm thinking about the word compliance is a bit of a misnomer here because this is really about, hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to record and play back. Yep. And some of those things are in the context of being compliant. But in a lot of the examples that you just provided, it's actually more about, I don't know, visibility to how well the company's run, which is going to enable you to raise capital.
That's right. That's right. And it's also around like the more granularity you have in, let's say, pipeline, a sales pipeline. Right. You don't have systems in place. So you're right. Compliance is not the right word the whole time. I've used it way too much, but it's think about processes and systems, which is just as boring as thinking about compliance. Operations. Let's think about operations in sales. So let's think about things like CRM and something that will manage pipelines. So HubSpot. Right. So in HubSpot, you can customize it so there's certain granularity around your sales cycle so that you can really see in the pipeline how things are moving through it. You can see upsell, resell, all of this sort of stuff. Right. That's really thinking through your narrative. That helps you tell a narrative to a VC much more than going, well, I've got just 2 stages in the sales cycle. I'm tracking it on a spreadsheet. Yeah. It's just, it's thinking about what great looks like. Right. What great looks like when you're going into a VC and you're talking a pipeline is the ability to show them dashboards in HubSpot. Yeah. And show them that you're actually tracking, show them you understand conversion rates from MQL to SQL to close, all the way through to close and things like that. And I think to your point too, that speaks to the operations piece. How is the engine of the business running? And the more you're involved with that And the more you've got the systems and processes, the more you can speak to it in a very clear way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that gives people confidence.
Yeah, we're using funding as a kind of a proxy for a bunch of these things, but a bunch of these companies are self-funded. I want to come back also to a lot of the founders that we talk to, I give them this label of impact-led, but I think the definition is important because everything has an impact.
Yes, it does. Good and bad.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting late for a meeting.
Yeah.
Impacts, not that anyone was late. But anyway, so the definition I'm going to use here specifically is these are founders that are trying to impact the world in the lens of the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Yep.
Now, that's not specifically just the lens that you have, but by the nature of the types of companies that are being started now and are at early stage, a lot of them have impact either part of or core to what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm curious with regards to the companies that you're working with or even the ones that you're observing maybe you're not working with yet. Does it happen differently when they're impact-led? Like if they have to, are they sitting in a different stream? Is capital coming from different places? Are they having to answer to different stakeholders and bosses, meaning that they have to do this stuff differently? Or do they need to just do it?
I think do they have to do it differently? I think if you're an impact company, you've got to be able to measure it. So that's your first thing, which, no one's asking a SaaS market tech company.
Yeah.
How do you actually measure that and how do you track impact? Because that whole greenwashing thing, that's when you get into that danger. If you're not measuring, you're talking about it, if you can't quantify it, that's a problem. So I think that is something that if you want to play in that space and you want to raise money from an impact investor,
right,
then that you definitely have to have that. So that would be a difference, I think, in that sort of thing. I think in terms of climate tech, let's say more specifically, which goes across 9 sectors from renewables to ag tech so it's huge.
Right.
I think, and this is just my view, there's probably more avenues for funding.
Right.
Because right now everyone's thinking we're going to drown or burn, this hasn't, or both at once. This whole, even the market going down, although we've seen a slight decrease in climate tech investment or impact investment, it hasn't gone like the other. It hasn't gone as low. It decreased as much as it dropped off as much as the others. So people are still investing in this. And I think there were people saying it's a recession-proof asset sort of class in a way. But I don't know about climate tech. Yeah. So and also it's broader, family offices. Some of them have huge impact. They're very impact focused and they'll only invest in those types of companies. Seeing more and more family offices in that space. So you've got that. They're not going to invest in I don't want to say it's a category in case I offend anyone. I think you really have to be in that.
You're going to invest in a coal mine.
Definitely not. No, but I think there's some categories that are very attractive to them. And so now you've got funds like Giant Leap who are just impact and just announced another fund they've raised. Main Sequence, just amazing in the deep tech impact space. So I think it's a really exciting growth space. I think the work that Mick has done around Climate Salad and bring networks. So they've got communities, the greenhouse is about to launch. There's a lot of people behind it and a lot of people that want to support it. So I think, yes, you might have, it's a hard thing to do what they're trying to do. Changing the world is hard.
Yeah.
There is more compliance. They're in environments that are highly regulated, most of them, and they are trying to change the world. So they're going up against big energy companies, like all of these sorts of things. But there's a lot of, as I said, there's just a lot of eyes on it, and a lot of people wanting this to work and wanting to support and fund the right solutions for these problems.
And because the nature of trying to change industries, if you call it that, shape systems, if you steal from the moniker, is, I think you mentioned it before, like it is inherently capital intensive. And so I kind of pointedly asked the question up front about how many of these companies are bootstrapped, and you're responsible. Some of them are, but I think ultimately for them to get to any degree of scale to the impact, they're going to need a lot of capital.
A lot of revenue. And a lot of them are manufacturing. Again, it's a great wrap.
10 million to set up the facility.
Right. So you've got that. You've got hardware is quite big in this space as well. So hardware's really come back as well. And we're seeing that being funded, which hasn't been for quite a while. It's been really hard. So that's interesting. Yeah. So that's really good. But it's just it's a really interesting space. And we've seen this happen before. FinTech was biggest thing ever. And then PropTech a few years ago became really big. And then this is bigger than most.
If we don't get this one right, we're kind of at
well,
the
we
end
are.
of the
Keep funding, please. Keep thinking of these solutions.
Hey, with the founders who are super strong in a technical sense, they've been out the back developing the protocol, or I think about GoTerra, I think is one of your
absolutely, Olivia.
Yeah. So, they've been producing the thing with the maggots. I'm bringing it up, so if you haven't heard that interview, go and listen.
It's incredible. Awesome.
So much fun.
Fierce.
Took us about 6 goes to get that interview back. No, because I don't know, there was some problem with the farm and a storm and an internet connection.
Yeah.
We were ships in the night for a while. But I guess the question I'm asking is, how far down the road can a founder who is having to solve a pretty high technical bar go before these types of issues around reporting, governance, stakeholders, even accounting and structure become non-negotiable? A lot of the time as a founder, especially when you're not aware of those ideas, but even if you are, these things need to happen. You'll be like, I haven't even worked out how to get the maggots to eat the thing yet. Like, why are we caring about company structure? Like, what?
I wouldn't worry. Well, that's the thing. I think you've got to get it to, there's nothing to structure if you're
right.
So I think it's really that all the idea and the thinking comes first. And I'm the wrong person, so I'm not an expert in any way in compliance, but I would think if you've got a compliance lens too early, you're probably starting to think too small almost, because in some industries they wouldn't have even, things are going to be created that.
Well, she had to start the Insect Foundation, right?
Right. That's what I mean. Like there's going to be, or we might have a rule in place that just doesn't
totally
need to get totally irrelevant. So we don't know. So it's, I think these people are just thinking so far ahead and so out there that I don't know whether you'd want them to, and I don't think you would want them to start going, oh, I've got to think about
my tax structure.
I mean, leave that to the experts. And also I'm sure the VCs or investors would have a view on that as well around when is too early. And interesting, we see companies that are quite, for a product point, quite progressed without having a lot of structure or anything around it, which is
two people who shook hands.
I mean, look, and they might be putting equity over everything over here while they work it out and all that sort of stuff, and we can help them think through that later. But I wouldn't, again, there's a real danger in wanting too much governance and compliance in too early.
Yeah,
I think. But
don't look about.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not, as I said, I'm not an expert in it, but I just think let founders, we need them to really think of these.
Well, you need them to have their head in that kitchen, not in whatever.
That's exactly right. Not think too far ahead, I suppose, in some ways.
Mm. And just with your focus in Australia, in terms of Australian founders, companies, the right word for it, ventures probably.
High growth ventures.
High growth ventures, yeah, sorry. We're 2% of the population. We're 6% of the land mass or whatever the right number is. I guess that. I don't know what that is. But obviously we're not everywhere. How, like the journey that they're going on ultimately to have a massive impact and achieve high growth is off our shores.
Yeah.
How does that play out? Because obviously as soon as you decide to go to Europe, you're in a different governance structure.
Yeah.
What happens there?
Well, that's when, I can speak from our experience with our clients, or the customers that we work with, startups we work with. So we're connected. So our sort of role in a way is we're trying to help them think ahead. So a little bit. So it's not when you're a founder, we've both been, you're thinking milestone, so next milestone focused. And so just for us, because we can see a bit further ahead, and we've in our portfolio management, we work with them pretty closely. So we understand what they want in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. It is, if, say, you're going to the US, it's starting to help them think a bit earlier on around what they need to think about. Where is the majority of sales going to be? Where are you going to locate? All of it has tax implications, transfer price. You're going to have all those
set
things.
Up in Ireland like everyone.
Yeah, do all that. Well, and what's allowed now because things are changing. It's making sure that we're having those conversations, and I think you can have that in a very inexpensive. Once we're working that out with them, and then they've got to make decisions around that. But making sure they're informed. But that is one of the challenges of being in Australia. We get lots of opportunities to sort of test and start things here, but going into those other markets, and I know it's a lot to think about when you're going over there.
And this might sound like a funny question, but work with me. Is it like I've got a clarity on a start, but is there a point where someone leaves the flock in that regard, in terms of we're perfect from X to Y, but beyond Y you start to move, you get out of the high growth stage and you start to become into a more stable. That's obviously tomorrow's
like
question.
In terms of the ones we work with?
Yeah, the ones you work with. Do they end up getting to a stage where they're like, we're now big enough to be self-contained? Or
Oh, that's right. Well, we do, for example, we've got some of the big ones that we do audits for. So we do all that. Now, I'm not meeting with the founders of unicorns going, hey, what about you? Yeah. They go and then they go
on a journey, right?
They go on a journey and then they've got their own people. So a lot of the things we're doing is more they're outsourcing finance, risk, they're to us. So we're doing all of that. And as they get bigger, they get their own people.
Right.
And then we help hires. We'll help with all of that. So that we're here to support them here. And then when they start to grow, they still use our services, but they've got their own people in there. And also then the services they need are very different. So they're using other areas of the firm. Like, for example, think about everything about Web3, revenue recognition, global revenue recognition for Web3. Oh, my God. Yeah, it's
Are you working with some Web3?
Oh yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we've got quite a lot actually because of that problem. I mean, there's these. Well, we wouldn't have known that, and then all of a sudden the firm had to develop.
Someone had to work it out.
Someone has to, and between the ATO and talking to invest, like it's a big thing. It's really fascinating, all that stuff. So yes,
never imagined I'd say that about compliance tax. Web3.
Oh my God, that's like when I went down this rabbit hole of construction tech, prop tech. I was like, how am I finding construction fascinating? I don't even know. But yeah, it is the tech side of all of that is like, mind-blowing.
That's wonderful. Well, look, I think we'll leave it there today.
Yep.
I'm always curious as to the levers that the founder, the venture, isn't thinking of. And I'd never sort of thought about compliance.
Yeah.
And I don't use that word broadly as we have been today as being a lever. But I think ultimately, if you come up with the most amazing solution and 0.1% of the population get access to it, then how much impact could you possibly have running everything well?
Yeah, and I think maybe the word we should think about is there's a couple that come to mind. It's probably more around intention and preparedness is probably rather than compliance to me is a bit like I don't want to do it. That's what I feel.
Right.
But I think being really intentional about your business, if you want your business to be in the number 1% of all businesses, then you're going to have to run it. It has to be great. You have to be great.
Right.
The operations have to be great, not good, great.
Yeah.
So I just think it's above good. And I think a lot of founders we see just think of that it's okay. It can be good. It can't be good.
I've got a friend who's an accountant. They're doing the books. And we haven't been fined yet.
We're fine. We'll get away with it. It's not like that. Just there's a lack of understanding what great looks like. And I think that's the real thing. And I think we are fortunate to work with some founders who are truly great. And I can tell you they're thinking about all of these things.
And a lot of what you're doing is if you're thinking about it, at least take care of it.
Yeah.
So it gets done and you can think about the actual stuff.
Yeah. If that's the way that they want to, they'll either do it in-house or whatever. But really, I just think for Australians here, like we have to compete against, we're here and we're doing things well. But when you go overseas and everything, sometimes it's a different level and a different bar. The bar gets higher and we need to start that way and think that way.
And I think we've come full circle. Because that's where you and I first met was when over in the west coast of the US, you were repping Australia.
Yeah.
You're still repping Australia.
I know. Great, but we could be great.
We could be greater. Let's just diaspora everywhere. I don't know if that's the right word.
I know. Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you again for your support of the show.
No, thank you. Love it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.